he lifted up his eyes. Give me just a few moments to deal with a slight theological parenthesis here. Some of your Bibles, at that point, read the word Hades. Let me tell you what Hades is. Hades is a Greek word. Hell is an English word. All the other words in this story and all the other words are in English except for that one. And what some people have tried to convince myself and others is this, that to get the real, true, authentic meaning of this passage, you have to describe it as Hades. Let me tell you what these guys have done. And I mean no disrespect to guys who are smarter than me, who do a lot better job of translating, quote unquote, than I probably would. But I'm going to tell you what these guys have done. They are theological cowards, is what they are. Because they're afraid to tell you there is a hell. Folks, it's real. And as you can see from this story, it's hot. It's long. It's torment. And it's miserable. And when you say, oh, no, it's Hades. You know what Hades is? Hades is a Greek mythological term for the place of the dead that if you're good enough, you can get out eventually. Folks, that's not what Jesus is talking about. You know, I got a question here. It says Lazarus went to paradise. Why didn't they give us the Greek word for that? Why? Because everybody wants to talk about paradise. Everybody wants to talk about that one day we'll get translated to this place where there's no more pain, there's no more hurt, there's no more crying, there's no more tears. We all want to talk about that. But we don't want to talk about hell much, do we? See, the reality of the matter is this. If you look at eternity, having been lived, having rejected the person of Jesus Christ, it is not a man-made invention called Hades. You say, well, Jeff, then why would you want to translate that word Hades into hell? And I'm going to tell you why. The Greeks had no concept of the hell Jesus was talking about. Later on in the Bible, you'll see sometimes the word Gehenna show up. It was literally a dump on the outside of town that smoldered with heat and stink. And Jesus used the word Gehenna. He used the word Hades to describe as graphically as He could these places of torment and pain. But to leave the word there is to do it a completely injustice. When you translate it, it is hell. Folks, the Greeks knew nothing of the hell Jesus preached about. They knew nothing of it. It is real, and it is described here. Luke chapter 16, I want to focus this morning on this certain rich man. I want to do something, an interesting study this morning. I want to look at what a person experiences in hell. If you were to go to hell, what would it feel like? What would it look like? What would it smell like? What would it taste like? Let's begin with any of those five senses. Let's begin with the sense of feel. Look in verse 24. The very last statement made in verse 24 by the certain rich man, he says, I am tormented in this flame. The last word of verse 25, tormented. The last phrase of verse 28, place of torment. He describes that the environment in which he is in for all of eternity, this place called hell, is a place of torment. Folks, that word is not appealing. It means a place of agony. It means a place of pain. It means a place of literal torment. It says he's tormented in this flame. You know, oftentimes we hear the term hellfire, brimstone preaching. That's what today is called. That word brimstone is found in the book of Genesis in dealing with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where it talks about the fact that God rained brimstone and fire upon those cities. It's found in the book of Revelation 3 times. It's found in the book of Isaiah once, where it describes the fact that God rains down brimstone on those who reject Him. So when it says here, I'm tormented in this flame, we get the idea of this hellfire, quote, brimstone preaching. Here's the interesting thing about brimstone. Brimstone, in our vocabulary today, is simply this: sulfur. Sulfur. Now, the summer before or after I graduated college, and the summer before I went to seminary, I had a very dear friend of mine by the name of Wade Reed. Wade owns a company in the Dallas-Fort Worth area known as Hannon Hydraulics. Anytime you see these large, major offshore drilling wells or heavy pieces of machinery, when the hydraulics break down, his company fixes it. They're the best in the country at it. He gave me the opportunity for a summer to work as a salesman for him. And the first couple of weeks that I was there, he had me pair up with other guys to get a feel of the rope, so to speak, before he sent me out on my own. One of the first couple of weeks that I was there, I was paired up with a guy by the name of Mike. We went down to a place called Glen Rose, Texas. It's the place where they have the famous dinosaur tracks and the nuclear power plant. We're going down there. We did not go to the nuclear power plant. We went to this other factory that was there. And we drove up, and I noticed that there was a lot of things very different from this factory than a lot of the other factories that I'd been to. First off, all the roads were this grayish, white ash look. It wasn't caliche, it wasn't rock, it wasn't pea gravel. It was just kind of a weird, almost like a fallout type of feeling. We go all the way up through these winding roads, and we get up there, and all the buildings have the same grayish, just blah look. But there is something of color that notices. That around every building there was this very large 2 or 2.5 inch diameter steel piping. It was a rail, so to speak, that was painted bright yellow. And it stood about 8 to 10 feet from every building. It went around every building that was on the campus. You could not approach a building, even the door, without first going through one of these bright yellow metal gates. On about every third or fourth cross member or post, there was a very large sign stating the reason why. We were at a factory that processed and implemented sulfur, what the Bible calls brimstone. And you may or may not be familiar with this, but when you burn sulfur, it burns clear. It's much like if you were to watch one of the auto races today, that alcohol is of such a high concentration, when it burns clear. But sulfur, when it burns, it is absolutely invisible to the eye. So when you're walking around this sulfuric plant, you have to be careful, because if there's a fire that's come out of the building, you can't see it. You don't know it's there, so they have everybody stand back at least 8 to 10 feet. Here is a man being tormented in a fire he cannot see. Folks, that's horrible. Usually when we see a fire, it has a blue tint, a red tint, a yellow tint, or some type of tint. But here, he is being tormented in a fire that he's probably anxiously desiring to get out of. He can't even see where it's coming from, where it's going. He cannot even see it. Which leads me to the second sense that he would have been experiencing, the sense of smell. You ever smelled sulfur? It's putrid. In fact, it probably goes up as one of the most disgusting smells on the planet. And I have 2 young kids. I know disgusting smells. And I'm telling you, sulfur is bad. When we went through that plant, we had to wear special masks because the fumes were so putrid. You know, I'm one of those Discovery Channel nuts. I admit it. I watch a lot of the Discovery Channel. Some of it's intelligent and some of it's very non-intelligent. There is a new show out that's hosted by a guy by the name of Mike Rowe entitled Dirty Jobs. Have y'all seen the promos or the show for that? What this guy does is he goes out and he finds people who have quote-unquote dirty, filthy jobs, and he follows them all the day, learning how they do what they do, such as sewer inspectors. You know, not the cleanest job you've ever had. And people who take care of chickens on chicken ranches and all types of different, disgusting, gross jobs. And what's interesting is if you've ever watched any clips of Mike Rowe on Dirty Jobs, in all of these really dangerously smelling situations, he always has a mask on. Why? To protect his lungs, to protect his esophagus, because some of those odors are lethal. You ever been in an environment where sulfur is being burned? Now, I'm going to tell you, I do have 2 small children. I spent a lot of my years in a locker room. There is no smell like the smell of sulfur burning. If you've never smelled it, it is the most putrid, gut-wrenching smell you've ever smelled in your life. And he says here, I am tormented in this flame. Not only is he being burned without perishing. In Mark chapter 8, Jesus makes the statement where the flame never goes out in describing hell. Not only is he being tormented, but he's being tormented by a flame that has such an odor that to our natural senses would literally burn the hair in your nostrils and the villi in your lungs. It was putrid at best. Which moves us to the third sense. How about a sense of taste? Look at verse 24. He says, he cried out, he said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus